A college werewolf student, Claire, struggles with her complicated relationship with Kieran while still haunted by the betrayal of her ex-partner, Daniel. She decides to accept Kieran's claim, but how will this decision alter her destiny? Can she truly let go of the past and embrace a new beginning? Unlock the secret life of a werewolf college student. Subscribe now for exclusive insights. Chapter 11. Once again Kieran and I found ourselves inside the big city that we stopped in on the way to his territory. I was doing my best to adjust to it, but like before, I felt like I stuck out and not in a good way. The restaurant we were in this time was not like the one we ate at before. This one was nicer. And better yet, it was Italian, my favorite. I got the spaghetti. After Kieran and I had ate our meals, we sat at the table making light conversation over dessert, which was almost finished off now. I found it surprising how easy it was to talk to him sometimes. When we weren't worried about things like our rejections or the mating, we fell into conversation effortlessly. It was nice. Kieran even seemed to be quite laid back and carefree tonight, which was something I hadn't seen in a while. It was very unexpected after how alpha he went on me today. I'm just glad he had more to him than just his job. Even now, we sat in the nearly empty restaurant laughing our heads off at a story he was telling me. We received a few odd looks from some of the restaurant staff occasionally, which only made the moment funnier. I was surprised that they hadn't come over and told us to quiet down, but I'm sure one look from Kieran would have sent them running the other way. He could be intimidating when he wanted. It sounds like you and Wyatt got in quite a bit of trouble back then, I laughed. We did, he agreed with a smile. It was mostly me who got him in trouble though. He just went along with it. I bet you both drove your parents crazy, I said without thinking and widened my eyes when I realized what I had done. I never should have brought up his parents. Kieran's carefree smile only faltered briefly before he covered up whatever emotion he was trying to hide and nodded. We were both grounded for a month and we had to clean up the other school's field, he replied with a grin. Later, after my mom was through lecturing me on manners, my dad ended up coming to my room and congratulating me and had a good laugh over it. It's a good thing Wyatt forgave after you got him in trouble, I said with light humor. He smiled. The waitress made her appearance at our table and laid down the check next to Kieran before clearing away some of the dishes we weren't using anymore. Kieran had already laid out the money for the bill before she walked away. She looked tired and somewhat relieved that we were ready to go. We were her last table of the night, and I started to feel bad we kept her busy so late. I always hated that at the diner. Someone would always come in close to closing time, and I would have to stay there until they left. Though, I did miss my job and the paychecks, even though I'd not really needed them yet. That's something else I felt bad for letting Kieran pay. If I thought he wouldn't get offended, I'd offer to pay for my own meal. I wasn't dumb when it came to dealing with alphas though. They had a lot of pride. Are you ready to go? He asked, interrupting my thoughts. He was standing up next to his pushed-in chair waiting for me. I nodded and quickly stood pushing in my chair, as well then taking his hand that was extended out to me. We remained close to each other, our arms bumping each other, as we walked until we reached the car. He let go of me to open my door. I slid in the front seat with ease. I wasn't sure how much time had passed when we reached the pack house, but Kieran shook me awake. I hadn't even realized that I had fallen asleep. I guess as was more tired than I realized. After my adventure in the woods I was bound to be though. Anyone would. I could tell it was late though. I let out a small moan at my interrupted sleep, and felt myself being lifted by a pair of arms. Without thinking, I snuggled to their chest, stealing their warmth. Their arms wrapped around me tighter, making me feel safe and protected. I felt the bed underneath me dip, as I was laid down upon it. The soft pillow and mattress were now my source of comfort now that Kieran was no longer holding me. That made me cold. I shivered and pulled the covers up under my chin, and covered my entire body. Without much effort I slipped into unconsciousness, and left my mind to rest while I slept. Just like the previous night, the dreams came again, making me cry out in pain. Only this time, they were a little different. Instead of reliving the day of my rejection, I was experiencing the pain of Daniel marking Jasmine. It felt like poison slowly working its way through my system. It started at my neck and worked its way down to my body, until every inch of me was writhing in pain. My screams became louder as the pain became unbearable. I was only relieved from the excruciating burning in my body when Kieran shook me awake. "Sure, it's okay, I'm here now," he whispered soothingly in my ear. His hand ran over my hair, as he rocked me back and forth in his arms. I was still lying on the bed, even in his arms, I could tell that much. My face was soaked in tears. My eyes fluttered open to meet Kieran's. His face was covered in concern for my well-being, and it was my fault he was feeling this way. I caused this feeling in him, and it wasn't fair. Not after all he had already been through it. "This isn't going to get better, you know. It's only going to get worse," he said softly. I couldn't speak. I just nodded my head along and clutched the material of his shirt in my hand tighter. I was surprised by the strength of my hands in my weak condition, because that's what I was, weak. My eyes dropped from his, a feeling inferiority overcoming me. I was not good enough for him. I wasn't even good enough for my own mate. He held me to him while he rocked for a few more minutes before a heavy sigh escaped his lips. I looked up to meet his torn expression. My eyebrows pulled together in bewilderment. "What?" I asked. My voice was barely audible, but Kieran seemed to understand me. He looked a bit apprehensive to continue, but my unrelenting stare caused him to go on. "I can make this stop, you know. I can make the pain disappear, even if the dreams won't, just like Heath and I have told you." "The claim," I mumbled. He nodded. "It will hurt, but only for a little while." My hand went to the base of my neck where it connected with my shoulder, and rested my hand there. "It's where the mark would be." He wanted to mark me now. His eyes focused on my hand. I came up at a loss for words. I didn't know what my reaction should be. It was a mix of relief and worry. "Look, I don't mean to rush you, the decision is yours. I won't make it for you." I appreciated that. I offered him a weak smile. "It will help me," I said quietly, mainly to myself. It was now that I wish I had my wolf here to consult on the matter. Though I don't know how sound her advice would be. If she was still partial to Daniel, then she would advise against Kieran's claim wholly. I couldn't keep going through this pain though. Daniel wasn't suffering, and it was hardly fair that I had to. I was the rejected, not him. What I hated even worse was, deep down, I still wanted him and would take him back if given the opportunity. This was so wrong. I knew it. I wanted to hate him. I should hate him. I wanted to push him from my mind entirely and forever. My thoughts were still consumed by him, therefore he was controlling me without actually ever being here. Just give me the word and I can make it all better. My face felt tight with the dried tears that still remained on my skin. I sniffled and forced myself out of his arms. I sat up on the bed, on my own, bringing the covers with me. "I want you to, I do." But I trailed off, not really sure how I could explain myself. "You're afraid to let him go," he finished for me. I frowned. "You seem to know a lot about me." I already knew why though. We were so much alike it was scary. He could properly sympathize with me, seeing as he had been through everything I was going through now. He sighed while he awaited my reply. "I wish this wasn't so hard. This would have been so much easier if you were my true mate instead of Daniel. Fate can be so cruel. Especially to us," he agreed. A knock at the door interrupted us and Kieran looked annoyed. He glared at the door before he spoke, though his voice was calm. "What?" The door pushed open with ease. Wyatt and Leland stood in it with disciplined expressions on their faces. Kieran seemed to have read their minds and stood up from the bed. Wyatt was the first to speak, when his eyes glanced back and forth between Kieran and me. "We didn't mean to interrupt you two, but there is a pressing matter that needs your attention." I blushed when Leland's eyes found us too. I thought about the possible things that were running through his mind at the moment and blushed even deeper. This probably didn't look so good. What would they assume? At least we were dressed properly. Kieran's eyes met the clock by the bed and frowned. At 5:30 in the morning. Claire should come as well, Wyatt said. "Why?" I asked slowly. Wyatt's eyes never let mine. "This concerns you too. Had I done something wrong?" "I don't recall it if I did." The trespassing issue was cleared up already. Did Sawyer decide not to be so forgiving after all? "Come on," Kieran said, holding out his hand to me after he quickly changed into a pair of jeans and a shirt. Even with so little effort to get ready this early in the morning, he could still look so good. Like some kind of model or Greek god. Life wasn't as fair to me. He was watching Leland and Wyatt with a carefully trained expression. I could tell by their reactions something was wrong. Wyatt must have mind-linked him and told him what was going on, seeing as their expressions all mirrored each other. I let the blanket fall to the bed when I took his hand and stood up with him. He placed his hand around my waist protectively and walked me to the door. Wyatt and Leland respectively moved out of our way and started down the hallway just ahead of us. From what I could tell, most everyone was still in bed except for the few early risers, and some of the pack fighters that had been on border control overnight. They bowed their head at us respectively as we passed by them. I grew even more confused when the group traveling with us led us outside. Dorian was now with us as well, and Chance, another fighter. All of them wore grave expressions. This was nothing new for Dorian though, but Chance I didn't know about. The daylight was just peeking through the tress, and I could see the slightest bit of light emitting from the sky behind them. Kieran never released me the entire way walked to the mysterious building where we stopped. I remembered seeing this building before and froze when I remembered what Kieran told me it was for. Was he bringing me to see a possible threat, or a rogue? This was where they kept the questionable wolves that trespassed onto their land without permission. What purpose did I serve being here for this? Was Kieran already letting me be a part of the decision-making of the trespasser's fate? I froze when we entered the building. The familiar scent hit me even before I saw him. I began frantically searching the room for him. I could only hope they didn't hurt him. Wyatt led us through another door inside the building that seemed to be filled with holding cells. They were all empty, apart from one. It was him. "Pierce," I gasped. He looked like he might have been in a slight scuffle prior to being here. His clothes looked a little crumpled and even ripped in a few places. There were some cut marks that were already healing on his head and arms. I tore from Kieran's arms and ran toward him, but he caught my arm before I got more than 2 steps from him and held an unsure expression on his face. "So it's true, he does know you?" he asked. "He's my cousin," I stated, removing my arm from his grasp. This time he didn't stop me. Pierce's arms reached through the bars and hugged me. I didn't fail to notice his look and the sigh of relief he released in my presence. "What are you doing here? Is everyone all right? Are you hurt? Who sent you?" The questions were tumbling from my mouth one right after the other before he even had a chance to answer them. "We've been asking him that for the past hour and he wouldn't answer. He said he only wanted to talk to you." "He claimed you knew each other," Wyatt interrupted. I nodded in reply but didn't answer, nor face him. I was too worried about Pierce. "What happened to you?" I asked him. He smiled playfully despite his condition and chuckled. I may have gotten in fight on the way in. I pulled away from him and shook my head in disapproval. You really shouldn't do that. You could have been seriously hurt. Don't worry. We went easy on him, Dorian said toward my cousin. I knew he was only doing his job, but I wanted to growl at him for attacking my family. Afraid I would disrespect Kieran's pack though, I refrained. And I may have started it, Pierce added with no regret. Why are you here? I repeated to him. Why did you leave the pack? Before answering any questions, he looked behind me at the pack and scowled. He didn't want to answer with them in the room. Whatever you have to say to her can be said in front of us, Kieran stated. His tone held finality. He was worried for my well-being. It felt nice to know he cared so much. I sighed. At least tell me everyone is all right. He looked worrisome. For now at least. Though, I can't speak for everyone. My parents. Alpha Daniel, he answered. A growl escaped from behind me, and within a second Kieran was pressed against my back. His breathing was heavy and angered. I could feel it on the back of my neck. It made the hair on my arms stand up. You came here to tell her about him? He asked. Why should she care? He has everything he wants, my mate and his pup. The words from his mouth were bitter and filled with hostility. I'm sure that if I weren't standing between him and Pierce right now, he would have grabbed him through the bars of the cell. He has fallen as Alpha, Pierce spat at him, then looked at me with slightly softer features. His dad took over the pack for him. He fell apart after you left. He hasn't been the same. Even Jasmine notices it. I think he regrets his decision of rejecting you even if he refuses to admit it. Everything happened so fast that I didn't have time to react. As soon as the words left Pierce's mouth, Kieran was pushing me into Wyatt's arms. He was careful not to let me fall, but he still caught me off guard. It seemed Wyatt had been expecting it the whole time. Next, Kieran had Pierce's body pressed into the bars as he tried to pull his through it. I panicked. I had never seen him so angry before. If this is what the mention of Daniel and Jasmine brought out in him, then I never wanted to speak of them again. I was frightened for the well-being of my cousin. I pushed against Wyatt's iron hold, but to no avail. I was unable to escape his bitter strength. If only my wolf were back, I might have fared better against him. The only thing I could do was glare at Kieran. What the hell? I shouted at him. He didn't bother to turn around at my words. He acted as if I hadn't even spoken. What was your purpose in coming here? He asked him. Was it to get her to go back with you? Did you think it would be as easy as telling her some pathetic story of her former mate? Pierce only smirked at him. Something I so desperately wished he wouldn't have done. He was purposely trying to provoke him. Isn't it? He challenged him. Wouldn't you go running back to Jasmine the first chance you could? She is technically still yours, isn't she? She is not mine, he roared. Even I cowered back from his tone. She made her choice. She severed the bond between us more than a month ago. I am impervious to her now. She no longer has an effect on me. And as soon as Claire is mine, that pathetic excuse for an alpha will be the last thing on her mind as well. Everyone in the room went completely silent. The saying that you could hear a pin drop couldn't have been truer. My eyes widened. I could only imagine the shock I felt mirrored on my face. Pierce was frozen in place. His careless attitude that I had become so accustomed to was long gone, and fear was placed in his eyes. When Wyatt finally released me, I ran to him. I gripped Kieran's arm in both of my hands and tried to pull him back. He was strong though. Too strong for me. Let him go, I ordered, though there was some pleading mixed in with it. Please. I hated how weak I sounded, but I didn't know how else to handle the situation. I was really in no place to be handing out orders. After all, it was my cousin who had trespassed onto his land and provoked him. He was the one who had done wrong, not Kieran. I was in surprise when Kieran released him. He let his hands drop to his sides and took a step back, trying to control himself. He gave me an apologetic look after he realized how easily he had lost control. I think Jasmine affected him a lot more than he cared to admit. I shook my head at him in disbelief before looking back at Pierce. Was this what you came for, to try and convince me to come back with you? Because if it is, Kieran is right, it won't be that easy. He shook his head. No, it isn't. He's still going to mark her, even though most of us disapprove. He's doing it out of guilt and obligation to his pup. I couldn't stand back and watch the pack become even weaker than it has already become, so I left. He's making Night Shadow look pathetic, and I no longer wish to be a part of that pack. Myself and a few others decided to leave. We were heading west to join the Red Moon pack when I thought I'd stop to see you. How did you find me? I asked. I didn't make it known where I was going. Uncle Richard told me. He said you were safe here, but it might pay for me to stop and see you along the way. He wanted you to know about the pack. I know you're not part of it anymore, but with your parents still being there, I just thought you'd like to know. I do, I agreed. Thank you. But why are you going to Red Moon Pack? Why not stay here? He looked behind me again and chuckled, his careless attitude once again returning. I don't think I'd exactly be welcome here. Besides, your mate doesn't seem to like me. He was looking directly at Kieran, putting emphasis on the words mate. He was trying to get another rise out of him, but all he received in return was a glare. Kieran was desperately trying to keep in control of himself, and Pierce wasn't making it easy for him. Can you please stop provoking him? I snapped at him, then turned to the guys behind me. Could one of you open the door, please? He's not some criminal, he's my family. No one made a move to do as I requested, and all eyes went to Kieran, even Wyatt's. He was clearly letting him call the shots here. I wasn't gonna lie, that made me a little miffed. Open the damn door, or I'll do it myself, I threatened. Seeing my anger directed at the wolves, Kieran looked to Wyatt and nodded. Wyatt stepped forth with the key and turned the lock, letting him out. I stepped into the cell with my cousin and wrapped my arms around him before he even had the chance to walk out. I wish you would have told me you were coming, I smiled over his shoulder. And ruined the surprise. Never, he chuckled. When I pulled away from him, he looked me over. You seem to be doing much better now. They seem to be taking very good care of you here. I'll give them that much. They are, I agreed. And so is Kieran. If it weren't for him, who knows what would have happened to me. Even though I was ticked at him for the way he handled the current situation, my statement was true. I still owed him everything, from digging me out of the grave I was putting myself in. I guess that's true, he stated. I could tell he hated to admit that out loud, but at least he was agreeing with me. Come into the house and we can talk, I said, stepping out of the cell and giving him room to leave. Kieran caught my arm quickly and dragged me off to the side, away from his entourage and Pierce. It wasn't rough, but it took me slightly by surprise. I yelped at the abruptness of it. He is a rogue, he said before I was even able to get a word out. He trespassed onto our land and, so far, has shown no respect to this pack or me. He's not a rogue, I argued. He's going to the Red Moon Pack tomorrow. Until he is officially part of that pack, he is a rogue. They are the ones I am supposed to protect this pack from. Fine, I sighed, no longer wishing to argue with him. It just wasn't worth it. We are supposed to be learning to become mates, not fighting with each other. He's my cousin, so tell the pack he is a visiting relative. It wouldn't be a lie. We'll see him over to the Red Moon territory tomorrow. His face remained grim, but thought about it my words. After a moment he finally nodded. Fine, but he stays in the room next to us. I don't trust him yet, and I want to keep an eye on him. Okay. I felt his attitude over this whole thing was a little much, but then again, he was the alpha and I wasn't. He would just end up doing or thinking however he wanted. I turned and was about to join Pierce when Kieran stopped me again. His hand caught me wrist and spun me around to face him once more. My wolf is returning and he's coming back with vengeance. I'm spry for my anger back there. After being gone nearly a month he's gonna make up for his absence. I might be a little bipolar, if you will. I can't really help that, he explained. You'll need to keep your cousin in check around me and my pack. I won't be disrespected in front of all of them. It will make me look weak, and that's not something I need just before I take back my rightful place as alpha. I got it, I said. That wasn't asking much. He had every right to ask that of Pierce with him being on his land and all. And if Kieran was right, I didn't want Pierce to make his wolf angry. He released me seeming happy with my reply and visibly relaxed. I almost didn't hear him when he mumbled thank you. I thought I might have been hearing things until I looked into his eyes and they showed his true appreciation. He seemed more like the Kieran I was used to now in that moment. If it's one thing I've realized now, it's that I had no idea what to expect from him in the future. With his wolf starting to come through he's gonna be more alpha than anything, and it's gonna get worse once he's freed. I just hope we won't bump heads too much when that happens. Being back in his element is definitely speeding along the change in him. I was starting to feel that maybe I only knew the broken Kieran instead of the Kieran he really was. I might just be in for a surprise to find out true side. But, I was still very curious to find out. Maybe when my wolf comes back I will be changing too. Every day I miss her more and more. Part of me was still missing inside with her gone. Just maybe Kieran's wolf can bring her out again. After all, they say a wolf's claim can do a lot of things. And just maybe I was ready for it. Chapter 12 And this is my room, I told Pierce coming to the end of our tour. Well, it will be when I fix it up, I corrected. I pushed open the white door, and flipped the light switch to on and took a look around. I had only ever been in this room one other time, so I was still getting used to it. It was definitely not as grand as Kieran's room, but it was still very nice, and would suit me perfectly. Everything was white and wood-colored. Tomorrow I'll have Kieran take me into town and pick up some paint for it. I think it would look beautiful with half purple and half white walls with a thin border separating them. I could practically envision the whole thing. It's nice, I guess for a girl's room anyway, he said. Well, I guess it's a good thing you don't have to live it then. I laughed, slapping his shoulder teasingly. He walked further into the room and looked around before plopping down in the pale pink chair in front of the window. He kicked his feet up on the bed next to him and let himself relax. Well, I would say make yourself at home, but it looks like you already have, I smiled. Placing his hands behind his head and leaned back into the chair, a wide smirk covered his face. He looked at me expectantly. What? I asked cautiously. So you and the alpha her? My smile dropped and I groaned and rolled my eyes at him before plopping down on the bed where his feet laid. Don't start, I warned him. You don't even know him. This isn't like the time you teased my boyfriend in the 6th grade, this is real life. Kieran won't stand for your careless attitude and disrespect towards his pack. Well, it certainly seems like he's got you bowing down to him, he stated with amusement. I frowned at him. No, I just have respect for him. Something you know not of. Just because you got away with everything in Daniel's pack doesn't mean that you can here. Or in the Red Moon pack for that matter. They actually enforce rules around here. Yeah, so I've been told, He chuckled, brushing off my statement. Why did you choose the Blood Moon pack anyway? He shrugged. Harley's sister Marcy is mates with the beater, Dawson. He said we are welcome to join. They won't start us out at the bottom of the pack there. I raised my eyebrow to him. I know there had to be more. And? He smirked. And I might have my sights set on a girl over there. Of course. I rolled my eyes and giggled at him. I knew it had to be something like that. I feel sorry for your mate when you finally meet her. She'll get a girl chaser for a mate. What can I say? I can't be tamed. I don't think there are mates for guys like me anyway. I knew he was trying to joke around, but I didn't miss the brief flinch at his own words. I felt bad for him. I hope he honestly didn't believe that about himself. It would be pretty depressing to go through life thinking you didn't have a mate. Every wolf has a mate, so don't go getting crazy ideas in your head, I said. He offered me a small smile before he yawned and looked down at his attire. His shirt was still ripped, he had dried blood on his skin where the wounds had healed, and his hair was disheveled. He looked horrible. Is there somewhere I could get cleaned up? He asked. I'd hate for Tara to see me like this today. Yeah, there's a bathroom down the hall. Unless you'd like to use the one in Kieran's room, I joked. He shook his head and laughed. Nah, I'm good. You should get some sleep. Red Moon isn't expecting you until later today anyway, and I'm sure you've been running for a while. Just from town. Lyle and Harley stopped off there on the way, so I came without them. They'll swing by and pick me up later. I think they wanted to get a feel of the big city before they joined the pack. I don't know what kind of crap they are going to get into this early in the morning, but more power to them. I nodded and stood up from the bed. Well, I'll just go find you another shirt and leave it here for you. This room hasn't been used in a while, so if you decide to get some rest, I don't know how comfortable the bed actually is. I'm used to sleeping on the hard ground during border patrols. A stiff mattress would beat that any day. I shook my head at him while he only grinned. Sleeping on the job, why am I not surprised? I doubt he'll ever take anything in life seriously. He's nothing more of a big goof off most of the time. He gets that from his dad, Uncle Rob, no doubt. I gave Pierce directions to the bathroom on our floor before searching through my bags in the room. The same one that had been there since the day I arrived. I'm glad they were out of Kieran's room though, because I'd feel bad to crowd Kieran's with all of my stuff. I had a lot of things. I smiled when I came across my iPod in one of the bags and stuffed it in my pocket for later use. Shirt after shirt, I threw out of the bag, until I finally came to one of my oversized night shirts that I often slept in. They were just so roomy and comfortable. I felt nostalgic when that scent of home hit me from my shirts. It gave me a brief sense of happiness while thinking of my parents. I really should call them again. I miss them. I laid the large white shirt over the bed like I'd promised and continued packing my things back up when a familiar scent hit me. This time it wasn't the smell of home. It was Kieran. He was there with me, in the room, standing above me. Did your cousin decide not to stay? He asked. I could hear the happiness in his voice form that thought. No, he went to get cleaned up from what your wolves did to him, I said matter-of-factly. I was still unhappy about that and had yet to let Kieran know how angry that made me. They wouldn't have had to do anything if he would have stated his reason for being on our territory, and who he was when he arrived. He was just asking for it by snapping at Dorian like he did, he replied with an edge to his tone. As much as I hated to admit it, he was right. Pierce knew what he was doing by provoking the pack. That's just who he was. I told him what you asked me to. I don't think he'll be causing any more problems while he's here. Good. I placed the last of my things in the suitcases and zipped them back up before turning to meet Kieran. He had been watching me the entire time. I'm tired, I sighed. I think I'll try to sleep for a couple more hours before I get my day started. You did get up pretty early, he noted. You probably should get some rest. I don't want you to start feeling bad again. I shook my head. Me either. Come on. I'm sure Pierce can find what he needs by himself, he said, offering me his hand. Yeah, he probably can. I gave Kieran a tired smile and accepted his hand before he walked me from Pierce's room and then to ours. I slept longer than I intended to. It seems getting up before the sun takes a lot out of a person. I made up for my lack of sleep this morning by sleeping until 11 a.m. Kieran didn't stay to sleep with me. Instead, he decided there was too much to be done and spent the remainder of the morning with Wyatt doing pack duties. By the time I was out of the shower and dressed, most of the pack was out of the house. I knew that because it was unusually quiet. Since I had missed breakfast again, I went to the kitchen to find me something for lunch. I settled for a simple sandwich and some Doritos. When I was finished eating, I was delighted to see I wasn't alone. Lana entered the kitchen before I left and met me at the door. We nearly bumped into each other, causing us stop and laugh. No school today? I asked her. No. I don't have any classes on Friday. I have a 3-day weekend, she replied happily. I smiled at her. Lucky you. She ran a hand through her long black hair and sighed. I'm bored. It's such a pretty day to be stuck inside the house. I'm thinking of going out. Would you like to come? I could show you around the town, where all the hangouts and good places to shop are. I jumped at her offer. Yes, I'd love to. I haven't had any girl time in forever, and I could really use some time away from here. Apart from going out with Kieran a couple of times to eat, once on the way to the pack house, and another time last night, I hadn't really done much sightseeing. Plus, I felt it would be fun to hang out with Lana for the day. Where are we going? Pierce yawned, walking into the room with Lana and me. I didn't fail to notice the smirk and wink he sent her way upon entering. She smiled and giggled at him. I sighed. I'll have to introduce them now. Lana, this is my cousin Pierce. Pierce, this is my friend Lana, I said plainly. She held out her hand to him. Nice to meet you. He kept his smirk in place while he accepted her hand and kissed it. The pleasure's all mine. When he backed away and released it, she giggled again. She was obviously smitten with him. Maybe I should warn her about him before she gets too interested. Lana and I are going out, wanna come along? Or is your new alpha waiting for you already? I asked him. It's cool. I'm going to hang with a favorite cousin and her hot friend today. I'm not meeting with him until later. I rolled my eyes at him and looked at Lana. Be careful with this one. He can't be trusted. She looked at him and smiled but nodded. Got it. He tore his eyes from her and threw his hands up in defense, feigning hurt. Hey, what did I ever do to you? Are you kidding? Where should I start? I scoffed. My childhood or grade school? Okay, he replied, lowering his hands and taking a step back. I may have done a few things that weren't exactly nice, but hey, the past is the past, right? I crossed my arms over my chest, trying to look angry, but Pierce's sad face made me give in and felt a smile form on my face. I knew he was so playing me with the pitiful look, but oh well. He's right. Yes, it is, I sighed, sidestepping him. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have somewhere to go. Pierce's looked excited. Awesome, so where are we going? I glanced at him and shook my head. We aren't going anywhere, Lana and I are. He huffed and looked just like a little boy who was upset with his parents. That's not fair. I came here specifically to see you. I even ditched my friends for you. And now you're ditching me. I couldn't stop myself from laughing at him. Fine, fine, you can come along. But behave or I'll leave you somewhere. That seemed to please him. He shot me a lazy grin and shrugged. I'll try. Kieran was sitting in his office with Wyatt when I arrived. They seemed to be submerged in more paperwork and business deals, and I felt bad for interrupting. It was clear Kieran smelled me as soon as I walked in. He didn't even look up from his papers when he spoke. Claire. What brings you here? Claire, Wyatt said, acknowledging me with a smile. He quickly noticed the pocketbook on my shoulder. Going somewhere? Kieran's head instantly snapped up in my direction after Wyatt's question and frowned. You're leaving. I took a couple more steps inside the office until I was almost directly in front of his desk and nodded. Yeah, I was just coming to tell you that, Lana, Pierce and I are going out for a while. I thought I'd go get some paint for my room. Alone? He questioned. He did nothing to hide his displeasure in that fact. No, I said I'm going with Lana and Pierce, I repeated. He shook his head and stood from his desk towering over me. You're not going alone. His words held finality, and his eyes were serious. Did you not hear anything I just said? I asked with disbelief. I'm not going alone. Wyatt was standing next to Kieran, watching between the two of us while we entered a staring contest. Neither one of us were backing down. You'll take Leland and Felix with you, he finally spoke. You can't go without protection. With news about us is spreading like wildfire, you will be #1 target for rogues. They know we are saving each other from losing ourselves, and the rogues don't like it. They want to see me fall. My pack is large and tempting. They want it and think it will be easy to obtain given the circumstances. I know how they work. I've dealt with them enough. I felt guilty again. Of course he has. He lost his parents to rogues. They can't be trusted. He's just watching out for me. Okay, I agreed. We'll take them. He relaxed at my reply and nodded. Good. He pulled a set of keys from one of the desk drawers and walked around to meet me. But actually, they will be the ones taking you. Felix will drive. You'll use one of the SUVs. It's safer that way. So much for our girls' day, I thought. Fine, but I have a feeling Lana wanted to drive. She'll be disappointed to learn otherwise. I feigned sadness. Though Kieran, being Kieran, could see right past what I was trying to do. Guilt didn't work so easily on him. You'll both survive, he chuckled. If you have any problems, call me. Okay, Dad. I'll be sure to let you know, I joked. Anything else you'd like me to do? He crossed his arms, not liking my joke, and frowned. Not that I can think of, but if I do, you'll be the first to know. I rolled my eyes at him and laughed before turning from the room and walking out in front of Kieran. I've already messaged them. They'll be waiting for you by the car, he added. I nodded, walking into the living room, and was just about to open the door when Kieran placed his hand on my arm to stop me, causing me to look up at him. Oh, and before I forget, I'd like you to be home by 5. A friend of mine, Clint Collins, Alpha of New Dawn Pack, will be here to visit, and I'd like it very much if you met him and his mate. Another Alpha friend. First Sawyer and now Clint. You have a lot of connections, I stated. He shrugged. It pays to know people. I smiled at how very true that statement was. The more people you know, the more connections you have. And the more connections you have, the more protection you have. Kieran's hand reached forth and gently trailed his fingertips down my cheek. Unintentionally, I closed my eyes and leaned into him. It was an action that completely took me by surprise. I think by spending so much time with him, the soul intertwining was already starting to take place between us. Dr. Heath had stated that could happen. I just didn't know it could happen so soon. Come back safely, he said before letting his hand drop. Trying to make sense of what just happened, I simply nodded and stepped back, trying to get my head together. Something was most definitely wrong with me. I mumbled barely above a whisper. With that, he let me leave and I did my best to get my breathing under control before meeting up with my travel companions. I didn't want any question to arise. That was just weird. Leland and Felix seemed more than happy to accompany us into town. Today Leland was being his usual funny, laid-back self, and it was a refreshing change from the past couple of days. I liked fun Leland much better than serious Leland. After an hour of torturing the guys with girly songs on the radio Lana and I chose to listen to on the way to our destination, we arrived at Home Depot. We all piled out of the vehicle one by one and made our way into the huge store. I already felt lost and I hadn't even begun looking for what I needed yet. Leland saw my overwhelmed look and offered to lead the way. Thankfully he knew his way around much better than I did. In my town we only had a small hardware store off Main Street, and the selection there was very limited. Anything that wasn't used on a semi-everyday basis had to be special ordered. It took days or sometimes weeks to get what you needed. Being in such a big city really made me realize how limited my hometown really was. Here, I was like a fish out of water. This was definitely going to take me some getting used to if I was going to fit in here. So, what color are you going for? Leland asked as we viewed the paint section laid out in front of us. The overwhelming feeling quickly made its way back over me when I saw all the different variations of colors. Was all I was able to get out. I had no idea where to start. Leland, trying to be the comedian he was, pulled a few color swatches from the display and held them out one at a time in front of me. Let me take a wild guess, hot pink. I felt nauseous, just looking at the unusually bright color of paper he held in front of us, and I cringed. Definitely not, I said, shaking my head. Okay then. He placed the colored swatch behind the other and moved on the next on. How about this one? Again I shook my head at his color choice. I don't do pink at all. He looked genuinely surprised by response and acted like I was some kind of foreign creature. I couldn't help but giggle. You are completely stereotyping me in an unfair way. No, I'm not. I just assumed all girls like pink, he said, switching the swatches. I shook my head at him in disbelief and crossed my arms. Exactly, that is such a stereotype. I reached towards him and grabbed the swatches from his hands and turned to look at my friends behind me as I spoke. You are such a guy. Just go do whatever it is you guys do and leave this to. I paused when I saw only Felix standing with us and frowned. What happened to Lana and Pierce? Felix smirked. They disappeared together the minute we entered the store. He's nothing if not persistent. He's trying too hard. I sighed. Well, I suppose you two will have to suffice. I want 3 buckets of this color, I said, picking a fresh swatch from the color choices. Deep purple, I suppose it could be worse. Leland noted. But if you are painting the whole room, you're gonna need double the amount of paint. It will take several layers. Nope, I disagreed. This will do. I'm only painting half the room. The bottom panels will remain white. It's still a girl color, he teased. I just smiled at him and laughed. Well, it's a good thing I'm a girl then. While the associate that was helping us mix up the paint, Lana finally showed up with Pierce behind her pushing a shopping cart. I smiled brightly when I realized what they had collected. You found the brushes, I said. She nodded. They were in the next aisle over. I didn't know what all you needed, so we just got a bunch of stuff. Well, that is a lot of stuff, I noted looking inside the cart. I don't think myself alone will need so many brushes and paint rollers. No, but a few people will. You can count on me and Pierce to help you, she added. Pierce looked like he hadn't even heard of the idea before and quickly protested. Hey, I never agreed to anything. She's your cousin, Lana stated. Family helps, family. Yeah, I nodded. And don't forget I saved you last night. You owe me. I teased. Lana was the only one there that hadn't heard what happened yet. I was kind of keeping it on the down low. I'd hate for the pack to know how much trouble he'd caused. Sorry, I'm leaving for Red Moon territory today, he said thankfully. Leland rolled his eyes at him while Felix acted as if he wasn't even there. He seemed too distracted with his phone to pay him any mind. No worries, Leland piped up. I have the next 24 hours off from pack duty after we get back and I'll help you. Besides, I'd hate for you to get paint everywhere. Please, I scoffed playfully. I've painted a room before. I helped paint the diner at my previous job, and it looked quite nice, if I do say so myself. Of course you would. You painted it, he laughed, placing the buckets of paint inside the buggy. Felix quickly helped him before steering the shopping cart out of the aisle and to one of the many open registers. After a brief argument over who was paying, Leland won. Apparently Kieran, and insisted on buying the supplies since I was doing all the work and warned the guys, before I left, not let me pay. I was not at all happy about that since I felt I should be contributing more. Once everything was loaded up in the vehicle, Lana and I had Felix swing us by the mall for a couple of hours so we could do some light shopping. Well, I did some light shopping. Lana, on the other hand, did anything but. She piled the SUV down with shopping bags while Pierce, Leland, Felix and I only had a couple bags each. I wondered to myself if maybe they were regretting bringing us yet. Not that they had much of a choice in the matter anyway. Nearing the latter part of the evening, Pierce had took it upon himself to choose our dining location, which also happened to be where the few guys from my old pack were eating. They were the ones who were traveling with Pierce when he left them to find me. They would be joining Blood Moon Pack later today, as well when they met with Alpha Sawyer. Leland and Felix were not happy about this and considered calling Kieran to tell them about our dinner-lunch plans, but after some serious begging and convincing, they decided not to say anything until we got back home. They didn't like to keep things from Kieran any more than Kieran liked keeping things from them. Like I had learned from the very beginning, they had total disclosure. You look good, Claire. Perilous Pack really looks good on you, Harley stated with a smile. Yeah, it's as if the last 2 weeks didn't even happen, Lyle added thoughtfully. I shrugged and smiled. That's just Kieran. He's helped me a lot. You liked him, don't you? Pierce asked, watching me carefully. Before answering their question, my eyes flickered between Leland, Felix and Lana, who were sitting next to me in the large booth. I blushed. They all watched me with curious eyes as they awaited my answer. It only served to make me more nervous than I already was. I wasn't used to answering questions about Kieran and me yet, mainly because no one had asked. The people in my new pack were kind of in the know, unlike my old pack. I wasn't sure what we were telling people yet, so with that thought I decided to be vague. Yes. He's a really good person and he treats me well. I couldn't ask for a better mate. I didn't miss the pain that shot through me when I said that. I still wasn't over Daniel yet and I knew it, but I would never let anyone else know that. I was ashamed of the feeling I still had for him. Things would have been so much easier if he would have just accepted us. Now everything different, it's more complicated. Why couldn't I have just been Kieran's 8 from the beginning? That's the same question I kept asking myself again and again. Why did fate have to screw us over? We were the innocent victims in all of this. Well, I'm glad to hear it, Harley said sincerely. Everyone was worried about you. I couldn't even imagine rejecting my mate. It's just not right. Yeah, and if I were rejected I don't know how I would deal with that, Lyle added. How do you deal with the pain? You just do, I said bluntly. As nice as it was to have them sympathize with me, the whole mate rejection story was getting a little old, and I was growing tired of having to be constantly reminded of it. I just wanted it to be over already. And there was one way I knew that could actually happen, to let Kieran claim me as his. And now, more than ever, I think I was actually ready for it. I was tired of being labeled as the poor girl who got rejected. I just wanted to move on and be happy. And most importantly, be a Luna. After we left the diner, Pierce decided to stay behind with Lyle and Harley and travel with them to the Blood Moon Pack after we left. I was actually excited to have some of my pack members close again. I always liked Lyle and Harley both, even if they did have a poor choice in friends. Dang! Why is Pierce never around for my good ones? The ride back was quicker than the ride into town earlier today. Perhaps it's because I was tired and ready to go home. I smiled at how comfortable I was actually becoming in my new place, even enough to call it home. You two can go in. We'll carry everything inside, Leland offered. Neither Lana and or I minded that, and we wasted no time accepting his offer. We were both worn out from all the shopping today anyway. Once inside the house we both parted ways and agreed we'd see each other at dinner, even though we'd ate so late that neither of us would probably be hungry. Upstairs in our room, Kieran was getting dressed. From the smell of things, I could tell he had just gotten a shower, something I very much longed to do before our visitors arrived. My breath caught in my throat when Kieran stepped out of the giant closet with nothing but a pair of low-hanging dress pants. His abs would have been mocking any other male in the room. No one's could quite compare to his. That would be hard. Have fun shopping today? He asked when he noticed me standing in the middle of the room observing him. I decided to just nod along, not trusting my voice in that very moment. I hated gawking at him, but most of the time, I just couldn't help it. It was hard not to stare. The sound of the closet door broke me from my thoughts and I shook my head of him. Thankfully he was putting on a shirt now, and I could properly concentrate now. Clint and his mate will be here in an hour. Will you be ready? He asked, coming to stand in front of me. I believe so, but I kind of wanted to talk to you about a couple of things first, I said nervously. I placed my pocketbook on the fold-out sofa at the bottom of the bed and sat down on it too. What's on your mind? Well, first, you have to promise you won't get mad at me, I said. His expression turned grave at my request. That didn't make me feel any better about telling him. I can't promise that, but I'll try. After some thought, I realized that was better than nothing inside. Okay, here it goes. Today I had a late lunch with Pierce and a few other guys from my old pack, the same ones that are joining Red Moon Pack today. I considered not telling you, but Leland and Felix insisted I did. If we are going to be mates, then I shouldn't be keeping things from you. He looked a bit irritated. You were alone with a bunch of rogues. They are not rogues, and no, I wasn't. Leland, Felix and Lana were with me the entire time. I didn't leave their sight once. I did just as you asked. Except not telling me about your friends, he finished, crossing his arms. I sighed tiredly and ran hand through my blonde hair. Can we not dwell on that? Yes, I should have told you before I did it, but you can lecture me later. There are much bigger things to discuss right now. I've come to a decision about us. He looked like he was about to come back with another retort until the last of my words caught him by surprise and he closed his mouth. His serious expression morphed into one of curiosity. He nodded for me to continue. I took in a deep breath. I've decided to let you claim me. You have? He asked. Yeah, I've decided I have to completely move on. And these dreams, I don't think I can handle them any longer. They are becoming too much for me. You were right. I do need you. We need each other. I'm just sorry it's taken me so long to completely accept that. His face held interest at my words. Why do you think that is? I don't know, I shrugged. I guess I just never liked to admit I needed help. When you offered me that, I accepted it, but then after I got here, I thought there was just enough space and distance between Daniel and I that I could make it by myself. It's only now that I'm realizing how wrong I was. He didn't reply, but his eyes held some sort of insight, and he slowly began to smile at me. So I continued, if the offer still stands, I'd like it if you'd claim me as yours. That's all you had to say, he said. He bent down in front of me and became level with my height. He tucked some loose strands of hair behind my ear, his cool breath fanning my face from our close proximity. I swallowed, not knowing what he was planning to do next, and noticed my breathing pick up. I didn't move when his hand cupped my face and brought me closer to him. Tonight, after our guest leave, you, Claire Hope Warren, will be mine. And without any kind of warning, he leaned in, pressed his warm lips to mine and consumed my every thought. Don't get left behind in the chase for independence. Hit subscribe and ring the bell for alerts on the next adventure.